All right, welcome back, everybody. If you can all please take your seats, we're going to get started with the second half of our morning program now. I hope everybody enjoyed our nutrition break, generously sponsored by Greek Seafood, and I hope you all had a chance to connect with fellow participants and exhibitors. It is now my pleasure to welcome Shauna McConnell, Vice President, Indigenous Partnerships from Western Forest Products, to the stage to introduce our next keynote speaker. Let's give Shauna a warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to speak briefly with you this morning, and I'd like to thank the Snuneymuxw First Nation for welcoming us to their territory to continue what I'm sure is another great day of dialogue, learning, and partnership building. At Western, we recognize the critical role of collaboration to ensure a strong sector for everyone to benefit from. Through our joint forest planning work, we are learning from each other to lead the way toward a higher standard of stewardship that safeguards healthy, productive forests. Together, we are also pioneering a model of shared business ownership and partnership agreements that advance economic reconciliation and lay the groundwork to move the industry forward. None of this is easy, but it's the right way to do business and critical to shaping a sustainable and inclusive future that benefits all British Columbians. It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who plays a key role in that future, the Honourable Ravi Parmar, Minister of Forests for BC. The Minister has shared that he requested the forest portfolio, and the sector certainly appreciates his enthusiasm and support for charting positive pathways during these challenging times. Please join me in welcoming Minister Parmar to the title.
I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Where was that? Is that Michelle? Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. I had a big speech ready to go, but I understand that we are running out of time. I'm an MLA from Langford, so we're usually pretty quick. We got a couple of laughs for that. And I had a bunch of forestry jokes ready for you. Some from the help of my friends from the Forest Professionals of BC, but you're not going to get a chance to hear them. So you'll have to wait till next year's conference, Dallas, to get all of those jokes. But I'll be very quick. It's an honor to be here on the traditional territories of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. I want to thank Dallas, C3, and the team for the kind introduction and the kind welcome to be here. Part of this conversation, I've been here for the last about 24 hours now, and it's been great to be able to check out some of the great speeches from my colleagues and others that make up the natural resources space, Indigenous reconciliation across the province, the networking events. I was checking into the Bastion Hotel. I didn't get a chance to be able to engage in the festivities last night, but it's good to see everyone survived the fun of last night, have made their way back into the room here. It's a real great honor for me, as was acknowledged in the introduction, to be here as the Minister of Forests. It's been a few months since I sat at a table like that, right across from the Premier, and did what some would argue was political suicide by asking to be the Minister of Forests, and I've never regretted that decision ever since. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to be able to travel this province to talk about one of the most challenging portfolios in our government, but also a portfolio that has a lot of opportunity as well. I'm a big believer that forestry, and I've learned this over the last few months, is about people and place. It's about the people of British Columbia, making sure that they're benefiting from it, and it's about this incredible province that we call home. In my travels throughout the province, I've gotten the opportunity to be able to engage with many nations and talk about the future of forestry in their communities and regions. And they've been tough conversations. And one of the things that I relate to them is, and I relate to all of you and to all British Columbians, the commitment I made to the Premier when I asked for this portfolio was that when I took on the role of becoming Minister of Forests, I had really three key priorities, and that was to restore confidence in this viable sector that has delivered for British Columbians for the last 100 years, and I believe can for the next 100 years. Secondly was to ensure that workers were my top priority, making sure that I was delivering for workers, families, communities, in particular forest-dependent communities, each and every day in the decisions that I make as Minister of Forests, the team of the Forest Service, but also to ensure that as I'm doing this work, that I'm honoring the commitments that my government has made to the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, to biodiversity, to ensuring that we're putting all of that work together and setting our sector up for success. Our sector is going through a significant challenge right now. We've got softwood lumber duties that are set to go up. We've got the threat of a tariff. We've got the threat of a Section 232 investigation. We've got challenges with fiber supply. We've got wildfires that are occurring in our province and have for the last number of years that have certainly decimated our fiber supply in different pockets of the province. And as much as those are significant challenges, there are so many opportunities as well. I'm excited about the work that we're doing on forest landscape planning tables. I'm excited about the work that we're doing on the ground, ensuring that nations are leading the voice. There was an MLA on the island, not too far from here, that said to my friend Dallas and some others that they were greedy for buying into a TFL. Thought that was absolute BS. We have First Nations that are purchasing tenure, that are becoming the major licensees on the coast, that are absolutely leading the way. And they're coming to government and saying, get out of our way, move a lot faster, and I welcome that. I welcome the opportunity for the Forest Service to be able to work with leaders that are creating jobs, creating opportunity, creating prosperity for not only their communities, but also for the regions and the province. I also want to share with you, I wasn't sure if I was going to get enough time for this because I've only got less than a minute left, but I want to read a quote from you, from a good friend of mine, and we'll see if he recognizes it. First Nations are increasingly starting to understand the value of forestry, but also forestry runs not just on the inputs and not just the knowledge, but the confidence in things moving forward. What I really need people to take to heart is that Indigenous involvement in decision-making and Indigenous involvement in the ownership of the land and investment is not a threat to the forestry sector. So when we're looking at things that are obscenely the erosion of lands for forestry, that's not necessarily the case if it's a First Nation that's involved in the ownership and stewardship of the land. Every Indigenous leader has to balance environmental stewardship with taking care of their land. When I look at my budgets and I look at a lack of income due to our forestry investments, that doesn't just hit the bottom line in a bank account in Toronto, New York, or Frankfurt. It actually impacts whether or not we can run the daycare, whether or not we can have 3 clinical counselors or just 2. Those are the things that really matter, that really do matter for Indigenous communities. I'll just conclude with this because I've got 8 seconds left, that I'm really excited about the future of forestry in British Columbia. We are going to face some big challenges. We are going to see mill curtailments, and we're going to face significant challenges over the course of the next year. But I'm also excited about the work that I'm going to be doing alongside Indigenous communities with First Nations, alongside industry, and all the stakeholders to ensure that we are setting ourselves up for success. So 100 years from now, when the Minister of Forests is standing up at this conference and speaking to the crowd that is here, that we will be able to talk about a strong, viable, and robust forest sector that's sustainable, that is delivering for people, communities, and families each and every day. So I'll leave it there because I'm now 49 seconds over, and which is not bad for a guy like me, I might add. But I know my colleagues. I've got a great panel. I'm looking forward to participating and answering all your great questions. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Parmar. And as the Minister said, he's going to be joining our upcoming panel. So with that, I'd like to invite John Mohammed, President and Owner, A&A Trading, to introduce our panel. Let's give John a welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge we're on the traditional lands of the Sinemu Nation. My name is John Mohammed, President Owner of A&A Trading Limited. We're in the timber marketing and management business on the coast of BC, and very honored to have and privileged to have several partnerships on the coast. One of those is with Dallas's community, the Tlwitsis Nation. It's probably spanned over 15 years. 2 generations growing, created economics, prosperity, and the ability for Chief John Smith and Acting Chief Dallas to achieve their goal of bringing their people back home, building a new village, Nanwakolas. So I'm introducing Dallas here, so there's not much to speak about Dallas because everyone knows Dallas, but I think we owe a lot to Dallas from the humble beginnings of this conference in Waywoodcum area. It was not even a conference, it was more of a workshop. Most of the people there didn't know what partnerships were. It was about discussing trials and tribulations and understanding where we're going to where we are now today. Multi-million-dollar partnerships across Canada, meaningful partnerships and reconciliation across Canada. So thank you, Dallas. You should be proud for what you've done with this conference. He's no stranger to relationships. He's a facilitator, a connector, president of the Nanwakolas Council, lead negotiator for the historic partnership between Nanwakolas and Western Forest Products, past candidate for the BC Liberals many years ago in the North Island riding. He's one hell of a golf player. He's a fantastic, talented podcaster, as we all know. I still haven't got my invite, Dallas. And the chair of an amazing conference, IROC. We've all said what a great name. I think perception is reality. The Premier said it should be We Rock. I think of IROC and think back to the 80s and my mullet and jean jacket, my buddies Z28 IROC, and cranking the tunes AC/DC, doing burnouts in the Safeway parking lot. But anyhow, that's perception. Anyhow, I won't carry on here. He's a loving father, a great person. So I have the honor to introduce the moderator for the next panel on forestry partnerships, my friend Dallas Smith.
Give a round of applause for John Mohammed. That's the best infomercial I've heard in years since Sham Wow. Hey guys.
Hey, Dallas.
I'm exhausted. But I'm exhausted because we've just spent so much tremendous energy over the last couple days, and to be able to sit here with the three of you who we've done many battles together, side by side. I think generationally, we've all been growing up and learning how to make these things work, and so it's really an honor to have you all together. So what I'd like to do is just give each of you 2 or 3 minutes to kind of say your piece to set the tone for this discussion, and you never know, I might call an audible, I might just decide to ask a question halfway through just to keep you sharp, but why don't we start with my brother, Chief John Jack, sorry, apologies.
Just John's fine. Chu, Oklama Sayachat, Ishtukshutla Huu-ay-aht. My name is John Jack. I'm the elected Chief Councillor for the Huu-ay-aht First Nations, and I should hold my microphone closer to my mouth. And in our time, we're a modern treaty First Nation. And what that gives us is the ability to own and control not only our own lands and territory, resources, but have real say over how our community operates and the types of services that we provide. And the reason why I mention that is because they're linked. What we do on the land affects how we serve our people. It creates opportunities for our people to build the lives that they want to live and not feel stuck. We have a lot of things to do, and it's all interconnected, it's all interdependent, and they all have reciprocal relationships. In Huu-ay-aht, there's a concept that we call Hishuk Masawak, and it means everything is one. And it's exactly all of those things. So when we look at resource development, when we look at economic development, we know that that is a vital pillar for what it is we need to do as a community to help create all of those things that my community needs, not only to rebuild our nation, but catch up and keep up. And because of that, we need to make sure that we have a real understanding of the economy. Exactly what our keynote speaker said yesterday, that First Nations need to understand the real landscape as it is and be realistic and demonstrate that we're being realistic and respectful. At the same time, we need to ensure that people understand that we're not just any old shareholder. We're a First Nation. And just as the minister quoted some brilliant individual, we're not just putting it in a bank account somewhere in New York, that we are trying to make our community work in a way that is more sustainable, in a way that is more independent or less dependent on the government. All these things help make our society better. And when I say society, I mean all of us, not just Huu-ay-aht, not just our neighbors, but everywhere on Vancouver Island and beyond. And so that's why these sorts of events are so important. And I always appreciate that they're being put on in such a great way by Dallas and C3. Is we need to come together like this all the time and talk about, and always kind of ground ourselves in what it is that is very important, that we depend together on making sure that we have principled natural resource development continuing in British Columbia, because it helped to raise people. That's where I come from. My dad was a logger at Northwest Bay Division. I grew up in that territory, right, in the Neuse. And my grandfather was a fisherman. I don't exist without forestry. I don't exist without natural resource development. We can do it well here together if we focus on all of the things that matter. And we get some things done. And I think that's been the overall theme of the past year or so. Happy to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Kim, I know, you and I first met each other when you were in government back a little bit. We won't date ourselves too much. I won't say which administration, but as you transferred into your new role at COFI, and we were joking about filling Linda Cody's shoes. She's only got about size 6 shoes, but the shoes to fill are still growing by the day. Just, give us a little bit of an introduction and your thoughts on, where the forestry industry is right now.
Thanks, Dallas. And it's a real privilege to be here with these political leaders on stage. I'm used to being behind the scenes, as Dallas said. I spent time working in government, more than 20 years ago, and a little more recently than that, but also a long time ago. But nowadays, I'm president and CEO of the Council of Forest Industries, Kim Haakstad. I'm new to forestry. I started in forestry in January, so I'm on a big learning curve. But I have incredible, the leaders on the stage represent their communities and the province. I represent members as well. So my members, our coastal members are actually all here, and I think we've seen them all on stage. Domtar, Western Forest Products, Mosaic Forest Management, and John from A&A Trading, who did himself more justice than I could. I think about how First Nations partnerships with forestry companies have advanced over the last while. I've talked to many people since I've started the role that have said it's been a fundamental change in the last 8 to 10 years about the kinds of partnerships we have. And, the forest industry is in crisis right now, and nations are, I think, now at the 20% ownership of tenure, so we are partners in figuring out the path, and I think the only way we can get through the challenges we have today is in partnership with nations. And, we have all of our members leading, creating examples that we can learn from. I think we saw the great panel yesterday from Domtar sharing their partnerships. Dallas, your community has had a long history with Western, as has Chief Jacks, I think, with the Huu-ay-aht Nation. Mosaic has really important partnerships with Huu-ay-aht and COFI. I hope I got those nations right. Trevor's nodding, good. That are really focused on both, economic benefits, but also those social benefits of bringing more people into the forest sector. And, John at A&A Trading shared some of his stories, but when I think about what the example A&A has set, maybe the best one is that the person who was leading a lot of their First Nations partnerships is now Minister Parmar's Deputy Minister, Mackenzie Lane. So we are pleased to have Mackenzie in government, someone that understands what happens on the ground in forestry to help us work through the challenging circumstances we have. So look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. It's just, it doesn't get lost on me as we've been talking about, the kids started us off, and then we paid tribute to the people that passed along the way, and just sitting, the three of us and now Minister Parmar, we've all sort of grown up together in this. A lot of these things weren't prevalent and in front of us. There is no guidebook to tell us how to do this. There is just some commitments to collaborate and try to do better. And while on a regular basis, I'm usually quite frustrated with the lack of progress, when you're able to step back at events like this and see where we went from no way in hell to getting closer to majority ownership stakes, but doing that without replacing any of the existing workforce, and be able to be collaborative enough that we're working with local municipalities and things. And all of this sort of lands on your plate, my friend Minister. You know, you and I have probably had half a dozen discussions just in the last 2 months about this, between Softwood Lumber Advisory and all the other tools that we're trying to do to make sure that this tremendous momentum is not only lost, but it's incorporated into the solution. So maybe just a few thoughts on, you know, what you're doing as government to try keep the wheels moving.
You bet. I'll be brief. We have a clock in front of us. That's very intimidating. Just building off of what Dallas said, I think there's a huge opportunity, huge momentum. Forestry is much more complicated than rocket science. I think all of us can attest to that. It's so unique, and I'm often reminded as the Minister of British Columbia's forest sector and forestry that you know, the province of British Columbia has such a unique landscape, and it's often larger than some countries as well. And so when we're talking about policy at a provincial level, we really have to find a way to localize that to the different timber supply areas and to different TFLs as well. And that's why I'm so excited that the mandate that I've been provided by the Premier to build a strong, sustainable timber harvesting land base that produces a harvest of 45 million cubic meters. It's not just a forestry project, it's an all-of-government approach. It's about bringing all of government, Walrus, Forestry, MERP, all those other ministries to the table, but not doing those in silos, involving COFI, involving the First Nations Forestry Council, involving so many that make up this incredible province and have a stake in forestry, and bringing them to the table. And I recognize there's so much leadership that's already happening on the ground. I was hanging out with Chief Ronnie and Minister Wilson over from Wei-Wei-Kai and talking about the leadership that they've shown in forestry and how they're leading the way. And I think there are so many great ideas that are already out there, and sometimes government's a little bit slow to move because we're so focused on moving the entire province that we don't localize things and talk about how we can meet the needs from a local level rather than a core provincial level. And we have to find ways to change. I'm excited about the leadership we have in the Forest Service with our new deputy and the team that we have there. We're excited to be making, I think, a lot of progress, because Kim's absolutely right. We are heading towards some really challenging days for forestry. If the duties go up, which they are scheduled to go up in about a month's time, maybe sooner, if Trump announces something, folks can pull out their phones and follow along on True Social. But there's some dark days ahead, and this is an opportunity for us to ensure that we are able to build that strong industry that moves us away from boom and bust towards stability. That's my biggest priority when I'm out on the ground engaging with workers. They've seen forestry boom, and they've seen communities be successful. They've seen industry be successful. But when things are tough, people leave. Communities suffer, and that's top of mind for me.
So, I mean, we could do this all day. You mentioned the clock being intimidating, and I've been looking at it for 2 days, and now I'm just realizing how fast it actually goes. Is that set? Has that been checked? Is that actually a real Timex piece? Maybe we should look for a clock sponsor for next year. But, you know, John, you and I, as I've said, we've sort of grown up in this. And what are some of the changes that you've seen that we need to keep momentum on? And I mean, I know that's a fairly fundamental question, but you look at forestry from integrated resource management planning. You look at it from wildfire management issues. Now, there's so many pieces to this puzzle, but what do you see some of the keys that help us deal with it across the board?
I think an approach that takes into account the concerns on the land and the concerns from the community first is very important. And I think the local communities need to be a part of that conversation. The First Nations need to be a part of that conversation. When it comes to our plan for our lands, we need to actively involve ourselves in demonstrating that we have a handle on not just the safety aspect and the environmental aspect, but the economic aspect as well. All three of those things need to work together. And so when the challenge arose several years ago with the 14 points from Mr. Merkel and Mr. Gorley, what we needed to do as Huu-ay-aht was get involved and demonstrate that we were doing the work to hit all of those points, to understand where the government may be going, but also to demonstrate to those people who depend on forestry for their livelihoods, and demonstrate to those who operate those companies that we're thinking about those things too, that it is very much a shift in how things are going. And since January or February, whenever the inauguration was, that has increased over time. And I think fusing those considerations around the local and the global is very important. And I think that's something that First Nations need to get out there and be a part of. I was the only Indigenous representative on a trade mission to Asia, and only Japan, because I wasn't allowed to go for the whole time. My wife wouldn't let me. I'd gone for too long. But we need to show a degree of solidarity, because outside of British Columbia, outside of Canada, it's about Team Canada. We need to be competitive with Finland. We need to be competitive with Russia. We need to be competitive with all these other countries. And listen to Japan when they say we're falling behind because we're not investing in the technology and productivity, and we're not always there when it comes to fiber. Those things matter, because we need to be able to be a good supply to the world as well as our own domestic, because we may not be able to rely on the United States in the same way, exactly as the minister has said. That means we have to pull together when it comes to those international conversations and have real, hard conversations internally. But we can't air our dirty laundry. We can't, or else it's going to hurt all of us. So I think there are ways that we can demonstrate confidence in one another, and that will help us move forward and be competitive, because so many things run on confidence, and we need to do that. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother. You know, Kim, when you and I first met, we were dealing with the Great Bear and trying to wrap that up, trying to get out of the conflict of the war in the woods. And now that you're going into the industry side of things, what are some things that COFI, I mean, I know COFI was usually more interior focused in some of the years in its development in the Coast Forest Practice, or CFPA, Rick Jeffries' group. Was more coastal, and then they sort of combined over the last couple of years. What's some work that industry's trying to do to just try to keep up? I mean, we're seeing mills close down and we're seeing a lot of challenges, but we still sort of seem to see the companies trying to find a path forward. So what is something you guys are doing at COFI to just try help bring everybody on the same page?
Well, I mean, the minister mentioned it, but one of the things that we're really focused on is reaching the 45 million cubic meter annual harvest, and hopefully going beyond that, but obviously always within the AAC. But you know, we're cutting about 50% of the AAC today. We do it sustainably, we do it well. We can continue to improve as we are, but I think we've worked really hard with other stakeholders across the forest sector to all agree that this is the target that we need to get the industry to stay alive, to stabilize, and to have a better future going forward. One of the challenges I think we have is that, when we have all these headwinds with the issues with the United States, as we all are aware of, but also, making sure that we have the domestic markets we need to as housing starts slow down and other things, we have to find, keep navigating and getting to cut. We have to get cut permits. Like, the biggest problem we have right now is getting cut permits. Nations are partners in that, and we have a process right now where it's taking much too long. We're moving not at the speed of business to get to solutions. So, maybe that's a bit of a rambly answer, but I think there's just so many things, it's hard to.
It's such a true answer, though. I mean, we take for granted the position we've been able to develop because of the global fishbowl nature of the Great Bear Rainforest, government invested so much time and opportunity into helping us figure out how to be more efficient with the referral process, which started with forest development plans, which went to landscape plans, which go to road developing permits, which go to cut plans, all those sorts of things. So it's a good segue to the minister. I mean, you have a new deputy who understands probably the plight of all this more than most over the last little while. And, you know, there's been some beauties. I think of Doug Conkin, I think of some of the great deputy ministers who helped open the door for this discussion, but now we need to walk through it. And while I don't want to get you in trouble with the Premier, I'll get over it if I do. You know, what is the Ministry of Forest looking at for tools? You know, you have tools in the toolbox that don't necessarily fit. I bought a Volvo once, and it was a really cool car, but when it broke down, I didn't have the ratchet set that could do anything for it. And that's really where I feel we're at right now at a policy level. We have policy that manages forestry from the last 100 years. And is the ministry and the province willing to keep going down this road and build some new tools that are a little bit more adaptive to taking in today's climate of DRIPA and all these other things?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
pal.
No, not at all. You have to. Mackenzie.lane@gov.bc.ca if you have any ideas. sorry, Deputy. But also, I'm sure she would welcome your ideas, as would I, for.minister@gov.bc.ca as well.
And I can vouch that he actually reads his own email from that device.
I do, all of them, even the days when I get thousands of emails telling me that I am killing the planet. But I would say that we have to look at all those tools. When I talk about the work that we're doing with forestry being a major project, it requires an all-of-government approach. It requires tough conversations across ministries, and it also ensures that we're looking at things that maybe government has typically pushed off to the side. One of the things that I'm really excited about is commercial thinning. When I look at other jurisdictions, in particular Nordic countries, they have been leading in this work for 40, 50 years. And there's huge opportunities for us to be able to do this work. And there's no excuse why we shouldn't be doing this work in the interior and the north. And I think there is obviously pricing challenges that we have to address. That's why we're working with industry. We've got a great partnership with Pulp and Paper Coalition, Joe Nemeth, and the Forest Service, in doing a pilot that best ensures that we can move that forward. I am getting closer to wrapping up the review on BC timber sales. I know folks are excited about that. I am super excited about what BCTS will be able to deliver in the future, and I've got really high expectations of BCTS. I've been really thankful to have Lenny Cho, Brian Frankel, and George Abbott on my team advising me on the future of BC timber sales, and really ensuring that BCTS, as the largest licensee holder in the province, is really setting the expectation for the type of forest sector we want. Because the reality is, if we're able to accomplish all the things that we want to accomplish, I'm going to have to go back to Kim and go back to her members and say, we're going to need investments. We need to be able to show British Columbians that they're getting something out of this. We're going to have to be able to go community by community. And it's really exciting because there are some investments happening. Gorman Brothers purchased the Princeton Mill, the Weyerhaeuser Mill. That's a real positive sign for forestry in the Okanagan. We saw an investment from Fraserview Cedar in Port Alberni in the valley, and that's real exciting as well. And I recognize that there are challenges in other parts of the province, like the north, where we have seen significant mill closures over the course of the last number of years, in particular the last 6 months. And we have to go into those communities, have those tough conversations, and ensure that we are developing policies that meets the needs of those timber supply areas. And I know that Mackenzie and the Forest Service team is out on the ground having those conversations, management unit by management unit, to better understand the complexity and to be able to ensure that we're building that strong and viable working forest as well.
Nice. You know, it's interesting seeing all these things come together, and before it would have looked like a car wreck, but it's actually, okay, you come this way, you come this way, and we're all sort of starting to meet in the middle a little bit better with less confrontation and less crap, to be honest. But with some of the crap that we do have to deal with, my kids just hate it when I say crap, so that's probably what I'm getting out of my system before I get home this afternoon. But you know, John, you and I are lucky to be part of the leadership group of ISCOM Investments with Dr. Michelle Corfield, and we've been lucky enough to have Shannon Jansen, the former Vice President and Chief Forester of Western Forest Products, help us as we're coming together as nations. And while ISCM is going to be part of the solutions of the future going forward, because we've got 22 nations that have come together to talk about the policy challenges, but to also talk about the investment opportunities that are there. But that is built on some of the challenges that we've had. We've had some places where we don't necessarily agree at the same time, and people have leveraged those discussions. And I think of my experience in the Great Bear Rainforest, where activists pitted First Nations versus First Nation on whether we should or shouldn't be doing forestry at all. I think we've all been pretty clear that we're always going to do forestry, and we always have. We've always managed trees, we've always managed watersheds, controlled burns, all those things. But John, right north of your territory, you guys had some challenges. What's some of the things you've learned coming through that?
Yeah, some of the challenges that we've had really did come out of the concern around old growth forestry. And so this is in the previous term of office, so before my time as Chief Councillor, but I do agree with the approach that we took. We really got in front of it and made sure that we worked together, 3 nations, and actually it's to the south of us, with our cousins in Didi-Dot and Pachi-Dot, to come together and do a declaration that we are the nations in charge of our own territory. We do not need outside NGOs to tell us what to do. We don't need that. We have an understanding of our own lands, our own resources, our own community needs, and we have better relationships with government and with business and our own people and our neighbors in non-Indigenous communities that we can handle it. And so we demonstrated that we could handle it. And then we rose to the challenge and did the work to make sure that we could demonstrate that we could handle it from both a business and governmental perspective. So we embarked on integrated resource management planning. That's what we call it in Huu-ay-aht. But it's called different things in each of the different nations. I believe Didi-Dot calls it an integrated stewardship management plan, and I don't know what Pachi-Dot calls it. But we need to let people know that we do not need help in that way to navigate our own lands and waters and communities. We're on top of it. And not only that, the previous administration under the previous premier, this premier, the previous minister, this minister, they've demonstrated respect for what it is we're doing. They've integrated those approaches into the FLPs. And as tedious as those meetings can be, they're consequential. That's where we're doing the work. And so from that perspective, I can demonstrate my respect for the approach that's been taken. And so we have that. And before I just noticed something. A lot of the names that you were saying, Dallas, it's Kim, it's Shannon, Dr. Corfield, it's Mackenzie, it's Shauna. How many women do we have in forestry that are doing awesome, guys?
Woo!
That's good progress too, and I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
We from an Indigenous perspective, we always need some aunties in the room. Those ones that can't hit us, but they can make it clear that they could if they wanted to. But in all seriousness, going through some of these things, we just keep getting stronger, and unfortunately, we only focus on the differences right now. Kim, how do you think we can do a better job of illustrating the gaps that we've started to bridge? We haven't gotten everything flowing the way it does, but I think one point for this conference, just it doesn't matter what sector you're in, spatial planning is a common denominator, because spatial planning isn't really subjective. You're putting something on paper for someone else to see, and then you start to mold your ideas together based on that vision that you're creating together. But just what are some of the things that COFI's trying to do to try just take the fear out of it and put things in there? And when you're done that, can you teach it to the truck loggers, please? Oh, did I say that out loud? Holy, sorry.
Well, first and foremost, I was going to say this conference, right? And the fact that you actually have people on the stage giving real world examples of what's worked. And we know that every Indigenous community is different, but we also know that you can learn from what's been successful in other regions and then take it home and figure out how to apply it where you live, right? And you made a bit of a joke about the truck lockers, but that's a big part about what we need to do. I entered forestry in January and realized that there are many, many, many forestry industry associations, poor minister, that not always are on the same page. And we do have to find common ground, especially in challenging times, to make sure that we can get through it, right? And so, yeah, for sure, there's differences between the Truck Loggers Association, which are contractors, and my members, which are the forestry companies that are processing the logs that they harvest. And so, that's kind of an employee-employer relationship. So there is challenges in that. But, one of the other big supporters of what we need to do in forestry right now is the unions, right? And, Dallas mentioned I worked for the BC Liberal government. We didn't always have a very good relationship with unions, but unions and industry are together in wanting to protect workers, as the minister talks about all the time, is one of his major priorities, right? And I think when we focus on what are the outcomes that we want here, that's how we get to good results too, when we can agree that we have shared outcomes.
This is awesome because we get to sort of joke a little bit, but the reality of the issues that we're dealing with aren't a joke by any means, but the fact that we're in a position where we can actually tease each other a little bit, I think shows the progress that we made over the years. I told a story about my first time at a spatial planning exercise and what was said to me as someone didn't know I was a First Nations person, and we're so far beyond that now that it's awesome. But turning it a little bit forward to the solutions, Minister, I appreciate the confidence that you had in adding me to your Softwood Lumber Advisory Council. And as we're talking about the tools in the toolbox, and not only are we dealing with President Trump and that kind of craziness in the United States, what you've now, I want to congratulate you for being elected the chair of the Forest Ministers Council of British Columbia. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what it's called, but all the Minister of Forests from each province have a committee, and our friend has just been elected the chair of that. But how do you make this a bit more of a national discussion? Because as we know, the trade war is a national issue. British Columbia probably gets hurt the most by it in the forest sector, but what are your thoughts on, okay, what do we do with Ottawa? What do we do with the United States? How do we keep everybody up to date on the progress that we're trying to make and float some solutions? Just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, you bet. When I was thinking about, in the early days of becoming minister, assembling a Softwood Lumber Advisory Council, I had a lot of nightmares in this job, some sleepless nights, and I had a dream where I was in Ottawa, we were talking about softwood, and the president of the US was there, and you were there. And I don't know about you, but there's no bigger force to be reckoned with than Dallas Smith. And so I called him the very next day and I said, hey, I'm assembling the Softwood Lumber Advisory Council. I'd love for you to be a part of it. And you've been such a great, it's been great to have your voice and perspective on there. It's great to have industry. I know Linda Cody is here, who's on the Advisory Council as well, and a whole host of other folks. Also working with the BC Lumber Trade Council to really ensure that we're working together to bring that approach to Ottawa. Really excited about the discussions that have happened with Minister Hodson, Minister LeBlanc. Recently, I know Kim was in Ottawa recently too. I'm sure having those same conversations, raising the profile of forestry. Now, if we were talking about cars, we're talking about steel, Ottawa would be bringing a lot of money out to BC, which is frustrating, really frustrating. And so when I met with Minister Hodson, I expressed some of that frustration, that we do need federal participation. We need the federal government to do really two things. One, to ensure that we've got supports in place right now to help industry, to help workers during this transition as we see increasing duties. And we need, as part of broader trade discussions, to ensure that softwood is on the table. And one of the steps that I'm taking is engaging with my provincial counterparts to ensure we're supporting the federal government in developing that pan-Canadian approaches. Kim will know well, and others, that hasn't always been the case. British Columbia sometimes has been left out. Sometimes we don't get along, most of the time we don't get along with the East in relation to our position, but we're trying to find a way to get towards that common solution. The Canadian Lumber Trade Council has been doing fantastic work these last number of months developing those ideas. And so I'm excited about the momentum, and I'm hopeful that the federal government will not just come to the table with supports in the interim, but will be at the table to help with the transition. One of the ideas that I floated with the minister was trade diversification. It was actually 2 years ago that the federal government actually cut funding for Canada Wood, cut funding for FII, which makes absolutely no sense when we have to diversify. We want to partner with them to address the transportation challenges that exist on the coast and in the interior as well. We've got tons of fiber in the northwest and in Haida that is being shipped as raw logs that we could find a way to publicly subsidize some barging of that down here to the coast to ensure that it's being processed at our facility. So many great ideas. I was surprised by the welcomeness from Tim Hodson, the new minister. He hasn't worked in forestry directly, he has funded a lot of forestry operations as a banker, and actually grew up in Holbrook as well. I was a paperboy there, so I'm encouraging him to make his way out to the coast and visit some of our mills and have some conversations with our industry and of course with our First Nations leadership as well.
Nice. I see that clock hasn't slowed down at all. I do want to give you guys each kind of 45 seconds to wrap up, but technology is advancing all the time. We're seeing mills having to get retooled. I remember, watching Western go through, before we started getting along, the song and dance of, well, we need this for our mills or we don't need this for our mills. And it was a bit of a shell game for a while. And as we've started building these partnerships, we've had to be a little bit more transparent with each other on how we do these things. Maybe Kim, I'll ask you just your thoughts on how technology's getting integrated in this, and do you think the companies and the industry on that side of things are trying to look at ways of kind of building some technology to help us with some of these mills? I mean, I don't think we needed as many small mills as we've had, but we need to look at how we do this at more of a provincial scale. Just some of your thoughts on technology and mill efficiency. That
Sure.
you probably just learned about yesterday.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things that I've seen as I've been out visiting mill facilities is that while some of them are really aging assets and we do need to get to a place where folks want to invest in the industry again, we're also applying technology in really amazing ways. And I think about it as someone who grew up in Grand Prairie, Alberta, a town with a beehive burner. And now we make what we used to put in the beehive burners into real products. We take a log and we use artificial intelligence and other machine learning tools to make sure that we cut to get the highest value out of every single log, and so that we can make different types of lumber out of it, and also then get byproducts that are usable for bioenergy, for pulp and paper, and other parts of the the value-added forestry that we're so well known around the world from British Columbia. And and then there's another piece of technology. There was a question earlier on the screen that was asking about the Nordic countries. In Finland, they can get down to the exact tree that they're going to harvest using LiDAR technology. So it's also trying to figure out how we can take technology that is inside the forestry companies from other countries and help the ministry do that, which we have been talking to Minister Parmar's staff about where is the technology solutions that can help move forestry forward in the next stage. But we're already doing a lot.
Tremendous. I think that's what it is. We're doing a lot and we're going to keep doing more. So 30 seconds each. The timer is going to run out. Logan's going to come up here, but it's okay. I'm in charge of Logan today, so we'll be okay. Now that he's fine, he's had the allergy medicine, he'll be okay for a couple more minutes. So Minister Parmar, 30 seconds.
Oh gosh, that'll be a challenge. Okay, so just building off of what Kim said, there are tons of investments that forestry companies are making in British Columbia each and every day. I was at Harmac. They're going to be going through their maintenance period and spending millions of dollars. Chatted with Domtar, another example where we're talking about $20, $30 million every year. And so the thing that I'll end with is I think something that government, industry, First Nations has an opportunity to do is to tell the story of forestry. I see my job as coming in here and working with the sector to restore that confidence, to ensure that we're standing up for workers, to honoring the commitments that we've made, but I'm also a storyteller. We all are storytellers. Forestry has delivered for British Columbia, but we've left some people out. As we look towards the future of forestry, we have to ensure that we're telling that story so the people from the South Island, up in the north, in the interior, every part of this province understands that this is a strong, sustainable sector that will continue to deliver good paying jobs, and we get the most value out of our fiber as well. I think that was 50 seconds. Sorry about that, Dallas.
It's okay, brother. Kim?
When I think about forestry, and ministers mentioned a couple times forestry as a major project, why do I think of forestry as a major project for British Columbia? And the reason is because I've worked in almost every sector of the economy throughout my career. It is the only one I know that provides long-term, high-paying jobs in every single part of the province. And so we need to preserve forestry because it is actually that viable long-term opportunity for us. And as we've all said, we do it well, we do it sustainably. We'll keep changing. And how do we get there? I think it's this panel is a perfect example. It's government, and industry. And that is how we will get through it. That's how we will move forward, is working together with First Nations governments and the provincial and federal and local governments to make sure that we are solving any challenges that exist in communities and continuing to do forestry in a way that British Columbians can be proud of, to make wood products that everybody uses in their daily lives. I think sometimes we talk about forestry and we forget what we make. We make furniture, we make houses, we make paper and diapers and components that go into electrical transmission systems. We are an incredibly value-added industry and have so much to offer. So there's lots of opportunity if we can get through the challenges.
Awesome. Last word, brother.
Quickly, I think we're in a stage of the economy, stage of geopolitics, and a stage in terms of forestry where we really do need to understand that things will have to move. That what we need to do as Indigenous leaders, as Indigenous communities, is focus on helping to make value, create value on a global market and share in that value. It may be time to put down the old tools of leverage to stop things from happening, because that's easy, like you said. It's time to start doing the hard work of making things happen. And I think that may take a few initiatives and a few catalyzing occurrences, but I think they're necessary. In order for us to have forestry, in order for people to raise their children on forestry, some tough decisions are going to need to be made, and I think they're necessary. And with that in mind, I think we have to demonstrate a willingness to have faith in one another, because faith manages. Thank you.
I just want to thank the panel. Round of applause, please. I think one of the things going forward is if we're going to raise the roof on this discussion, we need to continue to raise the floor. And I think that's what everybody here has been committed to doing. So thank you. Logan, you can kick us off the stage. And I'm just kidding, bro. Probably he's going to kick us off the stage.
Could we stop for a second? I just want to acknowledge that Logan was in the hospital last night and he's here today. So I don't want to go anymore, but this guy is great.
He's a trooper.
Thank you.
He's a trooper.
Thank you, Chief Jack. And thank you, Dallas, Chief Jack, Kim, Minister Parmar. What a powerhouse panel. Let's give them one more round of applause.